Tonight, I tried this a couple of years ago. Tonight, I'm live streaming on the internet right now. So, the camera's not looking at you, but everything ways. Thank you very much for coming tonight to the first Wednesday seminar of this season. I'm pretty excited. I didn't look this year, but I think this is year 7.
Wow.
And I think we've done about almost 100 seminars. And it's just, every time I set the new schedule, I look back at the old talks and I go, we have some brilliant people in our club, and it just, I get all excited about it. And I feel guilty because I don't have enough time in my own stuff. You know, it's really great. How many people is their first time in the club? Raise your hand. Got a couple? All right, well, welcome. Thanks for coming. Yeah. If you have any questions about the club, what we do here outside of that, you can track me down or Commodore or anybody that you think might know what they're talking about. Just a couple of reminders, housekeeping stuff. Please silence your pocket computers. It's always nice for the presenter. Yeah, presenter also. If you need to take a phone call or have a conversation, please step outside. We appreciate that. And but if you need to use the restroom, please don't hesitate. They're up here in the front corner. And if Ricky sees us squirming too much, he might feel like you should put the head. Some announcements. I'm going to turn the floor over to our Commodore really fast. I think he had an announcement to make. Jason Lauer. All right.
Hi, Jason Lauer, and I'm excited to serve you guys as our Commodore this year. And the one announcement I have is that the board and I are committed to going to no single-use plastic at the club. So I'd love you guys to be ready for that, especially since the Super Bowl party is right around the corner. And frankly, that's a big generator of plastic. So be ready. Thank you.
All right, good job.
Right. Yeah, very fitting for this talk tonight. Last Sunday, still more announcements. Last Sunday, I was reminded, was our 92nd birthday for the club.
Wow!
So, happy birthday, us. It's good. We've got some good events coming up. Installation dinner is Saturday, so hopefully everybody's signed up for that. It's gonna be a great time. We got some great music, great food, great friends. It's gonna be a good time. There's been a secret meeting event that's been going on. I don't know if some of you know about it. Tuesday nights downstairs, the secret cruising powwow club has been meeting. Yeah, so don't tell anybody, but you should definitely show up. It's a great event. It's very dynamic, very interactive. Somebody will come talk about our rules, and half the room will shout out of the room because they think they're wrong. It's a good event. Last night they talked about cruising the Delta, which was an incredible talk that Dan gave. It really spoke to the accessibility of cruising in our backyard, which normally we think, as Dan said, we go to the Caribbean or we go to Europe, but really if you just sail to the bay, you got a great, how many, 2-4 weeks of cruising that you can do up there, Dan?
2 weeks to 2 months to 2 years.
Just keep paying your dues when you go to
Well, you just keep getting lost.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Tuesday nights at 6, but they light the barbecue at 5:15, I think. So come bring some meat to throw on the grill or veggies, and come to that. Next week we've got a great talk from Larry Tortolino. I think I missed it. That's what it goes. He's got some fun stories to tell. One is, it's a doubleheader, The Mystery of the Mary Celeste, good sailing mystery story, and then A Land Divided, which is a story about the Panama Canal. So that should be a pretty good talk. I always look forward to his talks. 2 weeks from now, we've got wine tasting. No seminar, but come bring a bottle of wine, $2, and it's a good time. I'll give you more information on that. The wine is going to be red.
That's a real big word. That's a big word.
Jack will have to send out the wine. Greg, you know the wine? No, mystery wine, but we'll let you know. Any other announcements from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, John, crab feed on the 25th, right? We're already more than halfway full,
Okay.
so people should make sure they sign up for that.
Crab feed on the 25th. I just had crab last night. It was wonderfully delicious, so the season's good. Or is crab always good? I don't know which one it is, but it should be a good time. Sign up by calling the club or emailing the club manager, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, many of you might know Ricky from sailing in or on or around Aboriginal. She's got an immense energy she brings to the boat. I really enjoyed sailing with her, and I was just telling somebody this evening, sometimes we delay our attacks because her stories are so good. I didn't know a lot about her. I just knew she was a sailor to be on the boat with, and then I find out she got her master's from Duke and her PhD in coral reef ecology from University of Florida. She has studied all around the world. She's done the Caribbean, wider Indo-Pacific region, which is a new region for me. Latin America, on and offshore, and now she's working heavily on the California coastline, which is really neat. She's an expert in geological modeling, ecological modeling, and remotely sensed and GIS data, that's some brainy stuff there. It's not just looking at coral. And she's worked extensively in international policy. So I'm really impressed with her resume and the fact that she's decided to come to Santa Cruz to come work and sail with us. And so now she's a local marine biologist working with the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. And this fall, she joined the expedition that she's here to talk about. So help me welcome Dr. Ricky.
I have to learn how to manage two things at the same time. I'm ambidextrous, but this is going to be challenging. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Ricky Erickson, and like John said, I'm a marine biologist here who works in support of the statewide network of marine protected areas. How many of you know that we have marine protected areas? Wow, not just the sanctuary, right? There's 124 places or underwater parks out there. So I was fortunate enough to be able, with my position, my director let me go on this expedition that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. So I'm going to launch into it right now. I was on leg 2 of what's called XX. You'll notice the 2 X chromosomes. Expedition, which was an all-women's, okay, now the big challenge comes. Wait, I have to go that way? There you go. An all-women's expedition around the world. It's 2 years. 30 individual voyages, 300 women, so there's 10 women like myself. We're called guest crew, and we're made up of a whole suite. Every crew has different individuals on it. On our crew, we had people from the plastic industry, we had people like myself, marine biologists, photographers, videographers, teachers, people in policy, women who are running startup kind of financing, angel funding for plastic, reduction around the world. And it's 38,000 nautical miles. And you'll see it started in Plymouth, England. The expedition runs out of England, and then leg 2 took off from the Azores, which is the leg that I was on. So this was my new family. None of us had ever met each other before. There's 10 on every leg of the cruise. There's 10 individuals. These were our 10 women, myself, Erica, who works for the Carl Safina Foundation. She's a writer. This is a girl, Emily from Scotland, and she's a young, like your age, she graduated college and is excited. She'd never been on a sailboat before. I'm like, really? This is your first cruise? Sophie, who's a blogger and just lovely and hysterical. Nita is from Latvia, and Latvia does not have a plastic pollution problem, and she is working to make sure they don't get one. She works very up high in the Ministry of Environment in Latvia. This is Louise, who's actually going to be living with me starting tomorrow. She's from Cornwall, England, and she's a teacher. She runs something similar to like O'Neill Sea Odyssey. She's on sabbatical, and I'm hoping to integrate her into our community here while she lives with me for a month. This was our captain, Anna Strand. She was the best captain I've ever sailed with. I mean, kept her cool through all sorts of conditions. Absolutely fun, and a teacher. Maggie from Australia was phenomenal. Natasha, who is from Austria, she is the woman who's doing angel funding and starting all of these, funding sources for people, women who are doing projects around the world in developing countries. The next woman, Marita, is from Austria. She is the sustainability director of the largest plastic production company, Mondi, in the world, and was a wealth of information. Winnie, the science director for eXXpedition, also from England, and then Barbara from the United States, actually, and we're missing two that were on the cruise as well. But this became our new family, an amazing group of women. Oops, see, I knew we were gonna have a problem with that screen sign. Okay, so what was our vessel? I'll have to figure out this. So she was a Bermudan ketch. She was actually called the John Lang before this, and she was in operation for many years. She was specifically chosen by the British Army for an expedition to Antarctica. She's 73 feet 2 inches, so the crew is all British. So I must tell you that there actually is a whole new language for sailing with sailors from Britain. So it's not the cockpit, it's the pit. And, I want a white tea, and there was all sorts of terminology that we had to learn that was a little bit different, especially because I'm learning how to be a bowman out here with John and the crew on Aboriginal, and all the terms were different for the bow pole and, things like that. But she's, what else can I tell you about her? Yeah, she's a steel Bermudan ketch, and I was really freaked out because I'll show you in a minute that we had some major late season hurricanes that went smack over us. And we were talking about when we were departing, and I'm looking at all the NOAA models and all this, and we're looking at sailing out into 40 knots. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? But this thing can handle it. She was absolutely an amazing vessel. So we took off. Our route was from San Miguel in the Azores to Falmouth, Antigua. And the idea was actually to jettison a little bit north of what you would normally do if you were on that course, to make sure that we hit what's called the North Atlantic Gyre. The whole journey is 2,274 nautical miles. And because of the late season hurricanes, which worked to our advantage ultimately, we did it in 17 sunsets and sunrises. We did over 30 scientific studies, and we had everything from absolutely no wind to sweating, ourselves in our bikinis on the bow, to 40 plus knots of wind. We ate 55 packets of biscuits and an unconscionable amount of pasta, chocolate, sweets, and teas. This is the crew. I actually am not in this photo because I did the stupidest thing, where I stepped from the floating dock in San Miguel to the concrete dock, and I was calling my mother and not looking where I was going, and I stepped smack into the water and fell and thought I fractured my hip, but I didn't. So I was actually at the emergency room getting an x-ray when we took this. But this is the crew, and that's some of the girls that weren't in the previous photo. But eXXpedition, it's a nonprofit organization, and it runs pioneering expeditions, all female sailing, to investigate the causes of and solutions to ocean plastic pollution. So the founder of they started out, there's 300 spots for eXXpedition over the 2 years, and they thought they'd maybe get like 1,000 applicants. They've gotten over 30,000 applicants. We've been on CNN, we've been in the New York Times, we've been in National Geographic now. Actually, the director, Emily Penn, has given countless TEDx talks and was just identified as National Geographic as one of the most impactful women. It's gotten phenomenal press, and caliber of the women that were on this trip were just mind-boggling. Everybody, I was just like, God, you guys do so much. And the idea is that they bring us all together, we kind of brainstorm and get excited, and then we go back out into our communities with this new network of, you know, solutions. And so like tonight, Greg was asking me like, hey, we have the cornstarch glasses that we use here. You know, what are alternatives? And now I have this amazing network of women to kind of go to and, you know, help make differences on the ground, both at, you know, a local level. So a big part of what we do with eXXpedition is not just sailing, but we did on the ground outreach in, you know, locations everywhere that we go. So if you start here from, I'm not even gonna try to use the pointer because I'm gonna mess that up. But so we did, this is actually in a mall in the Azores. We were delayed in the Azores, so we did all these outreach events in the Azores where we interviewed people and spoke to people. We had a translator because they speak Portuguese. We did all sorts of surveys where we look at the amount of plastic, and we go into the supermarkets and look at where are the plastics coming from, what are the big product sources. We did cleanups with different groups. We were on television in the Azores and Antigua in both locations, and all sorts of interviews. This is us giving a talk, the middle one down there, giving it, oops, I'm wearing the same skirt. Oh my God. I guess it's my yacht club talk skirt, because that's actually the Antigua Yacht Club hosted us, and the Prime Minister of Antigua and the director of their municipal waste. Antigua has gone officially plastic free, but somebody I was talking to tonight was saying, you know, how China is no longer accepting all of our plastic waste, and that means that actually Antigua's plastic waste is floating around on vessels right now with no home to go to. But actually that's the Prime Minister of Antigua in the photo with us there. So a big part of it is just, you know, I think especially in a community like this, like bringing real international attention to what they're doing, it makes them feel a bigger part of, you know, a global crisis and a global kind of solution space. And people really were jazzed. I mean, here we were stuck on the dock for 7 days in the Azores because of these storms, and we had people, you know, every day were swarming down. And when we came in Antigua, you know, we had tons of vessels who were, you know, coming out to us in dinghies and small vessels to, you know, welcome us across. So it's gotten a lot of attention. So now I'm going to jump into our journey. So if you look at this image on the left here, basically where you see the areas right below and to the right of where Hurricane Pablo was, that's the Azores. And that's basically the day of our departure. We had Hurricane Pablo, one of the latest season storms ever recorded. This is October. We were supposed to leave, I think, October 22nd or 23rd. And this was, you know, that late in the season. And I've lived in the Caribbean for many, many years. And I would have said, yeah, like after October 15th, you're not going to see a hurricane. And here we had, you know, this one went smack over us. It wasn't that big, but certainly nothing that we wanted to be out in. And then right behind her was Rebecca. And Rebecca went, you know, basically right to the north of us. So we were supposed to leave on, I think, like the 22nd, and we got delayed over 6 days. So we were stuck in harbor, but what that actually meant was that we, you know, had all of this energy and all of this wind that was kind of a slingshot. So once we decided to leave port, and we left port 5 days or 6 days late, we took off in 40 plus knots of wind. And that's, you know, was our course. So here you see where we took off. This is the Azores. It's off the coast of Portugal and Morocco. The guys before us, leg one, so they left from Plymouth to the Azores. They had 12 days. They never saw the sun. They got rained on every single day, and they had no less than 35 knots of wind. So they had horrible conditions. And so everybody was a little knocked down on the crew. There's 3 professional crew that are on the boat, and they could sail the boat by themselves, but they don't. So we actually are the crew. And yeah, I can't imagine what the poor first leg crew. So everybody was a little demoralized because they thought, oh no, we're gonna continue to have horrible weather. But we didn't. We took off. So this is what it looks like. You can see we're all in, Fowlies, and it's cold, and that's the vessel right there. Was renamed from John Lang to Travel Edge. And they were professionals through and through. All of these girls, and I always get the question from the men, like, well, you were all ladies, right? But the captain, that was a male, wasn't it? I'm like, no. It was all female. And our captain, she was 29 years old. But all of the crew, so there was the captain, Anna, and then there was Maggie from Australia, and Sophie. And Sophie's in the sling there, and they're from Australia and Britain. They're all racers, like from when they're 6 years old, and they were the most professional. Like, we spent 2 days doing drills, doing all sorts of stuff. And so and they were just, like you say, they were funny as shit. They were just, everything was really, it was one part about the trip that I never anticipated. I didn't really think about like being all women and how that's different. And I do not mean this as any offense to the men, but like there was no stress and there was no competition and there was no like, oh, you can't get that winch, like, here, I got it for you. It was all like, hey, let me help you. And like, oh, you're not feeling good, let me get you a cup of tea. It was just a really different dynamic. And so, here we were doing drills. This is Sophie, who was...
So really important, when you're working that pitch, you're always looking at me, okay? Because whatever's happening, you can stare at me all you want, so okay. You're always watching me, so I'll say, down, nice and smoothly. That's it. Okay. Keep going. Help me. Okay.
So that's Sophie. That's, like I say, they were really critical on the safety aspect. We had a skipper's briefing every single day. That's Anna. While we were stuck, this is what the conditions were outside as Pablo went over us. And, one thing that I had to get used to, especially being on the bow, is we were clipped in. Like we had 2 clips. So you clipped in and then you had to we had another clip. So you had to undo yourself, put yourself in and clip again. And then, ask somebody, could you please unclip me? So like getting from the cockpit to the bow, was like 4 clips and unclips and kind of this crab walk. And I was like, I could just get there, and we got a little more lax as we got towards the Caribbean and we lost wind. But safety was really, really important and critical on board, and they were phenomenal. But I can't say enough about the crew. So we left 5 days late. The conditions were, anywhere from 4 to 6 meter seas, and we were kind of going into it when we took off. So this is what it kind of looked like. And as sailors, that it never looks as big as it really, really was. But it was. I was the only person on board who did not take seasick medication. So even all the pro crew were like, yeah, we're going to take seasick medication. And I was like, I think seasick medication makes me seasick. But then I started getting really nervous being the only one not. And this is what it looked like on day 1, 2, and 3 with the crew. Somebody said, it's like, it looks like a battlefield on deck. Like you can see, Anita is in the back. She's puking on the 5-minute mark. This is Erica, who works with the Carl Safina Foundation. She was just like green. This is poor Emily, the girl who had never been on a sailboat before. I mean, she didn't eat for 3 days. This is Yannicka, she's from Malta. She's a rock star. She works now off of the Isle of Wight. And she's got Natasha, who thought, you know, she was like, can I please just pay for a helicopter to come and get me? Like, I'll do whatever it takes. And so, yeah, it was definitely rough, and it was definitely, you know, I was the only person in the galley for the first 3 days, and there was little cooking to be done. You know, it was like, are we gonna have cereal? Are there mashed potatoes? You know, what can we have? So, yeah, it was not a pretty sight for the first few days, but everybody got over their seasickness. So plastic, that's why we were out there, and I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a 101 on, you know, is there actually a plastic problem? And I should say, I am not a plastic expert. I had no idea about plastic really from a marine biology perspective, other than what, you know, all of us as the public kind of understand. So this was a huge learning curve for me to gain, you know, knowledge in. But this is what plastic production in the world looks like. It didn't exist in many of our infancy. So when we were kids, it actually wasn't a product. And if you look at it today and what we've done with plastic, it's exponentially, you know, increased globally. And I can give you the slide deck so everybody can have this. You don't need to take photos, but I'm happy to share. One of the really key important things, and I was actually talking with Greg about this earlier as well, is that, you know, we're all like, well, we recycle. And recycling, it actually delays rather than avoids disposal, because it ultimately is plastic waste. And that's, you know, a big issue. One of the things I want to make clear is that nobody's saying that plastic is the enemy. It was a product that absolutely, you know, was revolutionized our modern day life, especially in the health industry. And it is in everything from our paper clips to, you know, things that we're trying to now send to Mars to create whole new planets because we're messing this one up. And I'm always like, you know, I'm not sure that's such a good idea. But another kind of misconception is people always say, well, it's Asia is the problem or Africa is the problem. And so if you look at the bottom here, in terms of exporters of plastic, the United States is, you know, the biggest. If you look at the top 20 plastic kind of polluters in ocean pollution, the United States is the only developed country on the list. So maybe the pollution is emanating from the Yangtze River in China, but the demand and the production, you know, kind of demand, a lot of it, we are a big part of the problem. And I think that, you know, understanding that the developed world's need and request for, you know, plastic is a big issue. And so we got to be part of the solution. In terms of plastic pollution, you know, it's definitely a problem worldwide. There's one dump truck a minute, you know, that goes into the ocean. It's 9 million tons, which was actually in 2015, and now apparently it's 11 million tons. And if you look at that curve, it's absolutely only going up. And this is what I thought the garbage patch would look like. And that's not what it looks like at all. So what is the big sort of producers of plastic pollution? The top ones that are found in the ocean, packaging is our number one. And this is really bad for me because I just discovered Amazon. So packaging, you know, is definitely the major contributor. Construction materials, so all of that TVEC and all the, you know, stuff that everything comes packaged in our construction industry is a big one. And transportation. So if you look at a car, you know, like 90% of your car is actually, you know, plastic. Airplanes, all of it's plastic. Railways, buses, all of that stuff. So these are the big contributors, which is kind of a downer because when we talk about plastic, everybody's like, well, I got my water bottle. And the reality is, we're not gonna water bottle our way out of this. Like, because it makes us feel good, and it's definitely an action as an individual that you can take. But this is where the big problem is coming from. So I think understanding that, and, you know, using our voices and using our knowledge is in terms of alternatives and moving these sectors towards alternatives is where we really gotta, and I'm not saying use a plastic water bottle at all. But this is what plastic in the ocean actually looks like. So the image on the left is actually from our trip. It's not big chunks of plastic. It's microplastic. When I saw the Atlantic Ocean for 25 days, and it looked beautiful. I saw a few chunks of stuff. We saw, you know, buckets. We saw a spoon that we, you know, 1,200 miles from anything, which we were like, how did that get out here? We saw some fishing gear, but mainly it's microplastic. It's little tiny bits of stuff that's been in the ocean for 20 years or so, and it just keeps breaking down, breaking down, breaking down. And this is what it looks like, you know, in organisms that are out there. That's a sea turtle that's wrapped up in fishing gear, and birds. So marine biologists are studying this in terms of the impact to the environment. 80% of all sea turtles have ingested or been entangled in some sort of plastic, and something like 75% or more of all birds are actually eating plastic. And I would not have believed that if I hadn't taken this trip. But having taken this trip, we had I think in the advertisement I said that I'd talk about a minke whale that followed us. So we had a scary thing where a minke whale followed us for 2 days, and it was huge seas. So we were on a downwind sail and just like rocketing, you know, it was probably like 5-6 meter seas, but it was a following sea. And we had tons of wind, but this minke whale kind of showed up on our stern, and then he would disappear, go underneath the boat, and he'd turn upside down and, you know, just dive and then disappear. I realized our captain was really worried about it. It was like, Ricky, get on the bow, you know, and I want you to see what he's doing, because she says that over the last few years, she's been on vessels her whole life, and she says that in the last few years, they've had 5 vessels that have been sunk by whales in the Atlantic, which I didn't hear about. And she's like, what is he doing? I'm like, you know, I'm a marine biologist. It's like that Seinfeld thing. You know, my dad used to always tell that joke. Like, I don't know about every organism that's out there, and I don't know what this whale is doing calling us. But he disappeared off our bow, and then like 30 minutes later, we look about 500 meters, a kilometer behind us, and you'd see his spout, and then you'd see him like in a wave behind us, you know, risen really high up. And then all of a sudden he just like power forward again, cruise underneath the boat. And, you know, he wasn't doing, I think he was lonely. That was my thing. And he just sort of, we were under full sail, you know, so we weren't making any noise. And he just followed us for a few days, but he's a baleen whale. And here we are, every day we're sampling, and every day that's what we're catching in our samples. And if we're catching that and he's just sucking randomly through the water, he's sampling that and he's eating that, right? So, you know, it just is this tremendous problem that, you know, I know we have this whole project that's going off, you know, in the garbage patch, but I don't see how we're ever gonna fix what's already out there. You know, there's no, you know, there's been a lot of studies and a lot of different things like magneting and, you know, can you get it to adhere to it? But you're talking about every ocean looks like this. And the girls were just in the Sandbloss Islands, and they were saying it was orders of magnitude worse. So actually, here's the numbers that I was looking for before. So 44% of all seabirds have ingested plastic, 43% of all ocean mammals, and 86%. So it's kind of close. And this is, if we don't care about marine life, we ought to care about us, because if microplastics are going into, zooplankton and phytoplankton and, small fishes, ultimately we are going to be and are ingesting plastic, through the things that we eat. So this is a little bit of the we'll get off the depressing bit for a minute and go back to the fun life at sea. But this is what life at sea looked like. Every day we were on watches. We were 4 on, 2 off, 4 on, 6 off, 4 on, 2 off. So we had 3 teams of, I was lucky because I was on a team of 4. Most teams were actually only 3. And then you were responsible, so we were working around the clock. So at a night, you were either on the 8 to 12, the 12 to 4, or the 4 to 8. And then all of us were responsible for either 1 to 2 meals a day. And those of us that were on the 4 to 8 shift were also responsible every single day. The entire vessel got cleaned from, bow to stern. So this is actually the captain and first mate after we had just caught our first mahi-mahi.
Did Anna finally catch a fish? Two mahi-mahi.
So we spent the entire trip trying to catch fish, and we only caught 2 mahi-mahi, which were about this big, which I was like, I don't think they're, actually mature yet, and was, the marine biologist who was like, maybe we ought to throw them back, but I got overruled. It was a vegetarian cruise, by the way. I had 2 saucissons that I'd gotten in Mallorca that I stashed in my bag for the trip, and we were allowed to eat whatever fish was caught on board, but we only got those 2. But that's what the galley looks like. And after about day 6, we ran out of any fresh produce. So this is what and you can see this swell behind us. Like this is what it was. As sailors, you all know, it's kind of one pot meals, a lot of mush, a lot of carbs by day 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You're like, if I see another bean or rice or pasta, I'm gonna, go green. And that's Winnie and Sophie was just hysterical. And they call it the pit, not the cockpit, which I'd never heard before. And this is my team. So this is our team. We're on an early morning watch. I think we're probably on the 4 to 8 watch here. This is Marita, who was from the plastic company Mondi.
Good morning. Good morning. So good to know. The seats are way bigger than they owned here in the video. And there's Sexy and Peter. And there is a double rainbow. 2 rainbows. Biscuit. I love how you say that. Biscuit bar. Yeah, some chocolate.
She called it biscuit, so we ate a lot of biscuits. So, part of the thing of being all women, we had a lot of hair braiding. We had a lot of, do these valleys make me look fat? And, do I have something on my face? And it was just all these little things that you don't realize that it was so nice being all women that, we just could say those things, and not get laughed at. So, that's the captain and first mate again. And then, we had a water maker on board, but because we were, taking advantage of this incredible wind that we had, it was absolutely downwind sail, but it was so fast that we were going that we couldn't use the water maker for a lot of the time. So water and showers, were a specialty. This is our bunk area.
I'm taking my stuff and I will be blessed by the water.
And you got a shower, Emily? Okay, so now it's not gonna be us that stink up here.
Yes, we are all
It-
clean.
It does smell though.
And that's me doing my laundry in the cockpit. So that's how we did our laundry, was in salt water, and then hanging it over the side. And this is just some of the fun that we had with. We baked bread. We actually ran out of bread, which is a bummer. We had some problems with some storage issues in the downwind. At the helm was just amazingly difficult. Most of the crew couldn't handle, most of the guest crew couldn't handle, helming in the downwind, because you'd be at the helm and we had to only be at the helm for like 35 to 45 minutes because it was so hard, on your arms and on your legs. And like every time you got the swell was actually coming kind of from our beam. So you'd get hit by a swell and you'd literally be knocked off like 30 to 40 degrees off course. And because we were so delayed, trying to have a straight line course was so important that, we really needed to stick to it. So these are some of the girls, these were I was baking scones that sucked. I called them scone snacks. Instead of scones. And we did a lot of science on board. So every day, in addition to, our duties with cleaning and, photography, and we had to write blogs every day. We also were doing science on board. So we did the Great Nurdle Hunt on shore. We did these store assessments. We did sediment sampling in all of the ports, and we did a bunch of analysis, and I did fish and gut analysis, and also looking at larvae while we were on board. So this is the manta trawl that we used every day, that we threw overboard to actually sample. And at the end of it, kind of a cod end, was a small filter that was used to actually filter, and that's where we saw, the microplastic that was in there. We also did these PCB and chemical samples where, when it was calm enough, we'd actually put this screen mesh on the surface, and actually we could send that away. And so there's about 50 different institutions and universities across the world, and an increasing number that are actually using this data that we're collecting and actually analyzing to get a global. So this isn't, it's really incredible because this is going around the world. So these methods are being replicated in every place that they go, which is really, unique. And as a scientist, it's really cool. The researchers on board, or the people on board, are not specialists. Like, I was the marine biologist, but I'm not a plastics expert. But the protocols that are being used are standardized and can be then sent off to universities and places around the globe to be added to the database. Whoopsie. So this is where a typical sample, we were going through the Sargassum Sea, we went up into the gyre, the North Atlantic gyre. So this is what it would look like, right? So you can see tons of sargassum. You can see some larvae and phytoplankton that are zooplankton that were in there. But a lot of the blue bits and white chunks, that's what the garbage patch looks like. It's not chunks, it's little chunks. But if you're a whale, there were, and I'll get to this in a second, there's way more plastic in there than there is phytoplankton. So we would go and, we had about 5 hours of science every day, and that's actually a plastic cap that we found halfway across the ocean, completely intact. And you're like, where did that, come from? So how does it happen? It's called basically the big breakup, is what we refer to it. Does anybody know what a nurdle is? Yeah, so the nurdles, that is a jar full of nurdles. And nurdles are basically the raw materials for all the plastic that you see out there in the world. Any plastic that you actually use comes from one of these colored little things. And they're basically little lentil size, pieces of plastic. And apparently they fall off of ships and they get released from all of the nurdle production factories along the coastlines, and they're everywhere out there. There's literally 250,000 tons that are entering our oceans each year. And we found tons and tons of these. This says, do fish eat lunch with a spoon? So this is, what we found in terms of, I was really interested in the ratio of, life, basically, zooplankton to plastic. And in our leg, microplastics outnumbered larval fish 7-1. In the leg that just went from, they went from Aruba to the San Blas Islands in Panama, and this number was 70-1. So they found tons more plastic than we found, which is interesting because we were in the garbage patch and they weren't. We found some really cool, just because I'm a marine biologist and a fish ecologist. So that guy in the middle, a colleague of mine is at the Smithsonian Institute, and offered to actually analyze and identify all the larvae that we found. That's a baby marlin, which was just super cool. Yeah, so we found that's Bella Bella up on the top. You guys probably know that, the little sailors of the sea. We found some really cool little larvae, but yeah, we found some neat stuff out there, which is really just neat to see. This is what it looked like this is about halfway across when we're in the gyre.
That's about 30 knots. Follow us. Sailing to a micro eddy.
So what is a gyre? A lot of people have heard about the Great Pacific garbage patch, which is in the Pacific Gyre, but there are gyres in every body of the ocean. So this is what it looks like starting from a week 1, if you're a particle, and then you can see that every major ocean body basically creates a gyre. And so we were in the one, which is actually one of the smallest, you can tell, out there, off of the coast of Africa. But there are gyres, which means just basically it's circulation, and oceanography that aggregates stuff together. And so there you can see why, that Great Pacific Garbage Patch is so dense, and it's actually, relatively close to San Francisco. So what's the fate of plastic? 55% goes straight to our landfills. So our landfills, in terms of their management and, containing the material that we have our landfill is right off the coast, like just a couple hundred meters probably off the shore. 30% is still in use, and only 6-7% is actually recycled. So we have a long way to go in terms of how we handle plastic. This is some of the decomposition rates of plastic. And you can see that, a plastic bottle takes 450 years for something that you literally use in 5 minutes. And that's kind of the lesson that I learned of plastic, is that plastic is a product that's designed to last forever, or ever for our life, spans. And yet we're basically misusing it because it's so cheap and easy to use and produce, that we're using it for, things that we only use it for seconds or minutes. These are some more kind of just fun photos from Life on Board, Travel Edge, and focusing in on some of the marine life. I was really kind of surprised at the lack of marine life that we saw, We did see, we had some storm petrels and shearwaters. We had a guy who followed us for a couple days. We had about 6 or 7 pods of the spotted Atlantic dolphins, which are a lot smaller than like the bottlenose dolphins, but were really cool. And of course, got the girls all excited, every time, even if you'd just gone to sleep at 4 a.m., if there was a 7 a.m., like dolphins, everybody got up. And then, we did get our mahi-mahi dolphin as well. So the captain was really excited that we did have a halfway party. Unfortunately, we had about 27 minutes to have the halfway party because a storm squall was coming in. We spent 2 days, there was a contest. We were supposed to just come up with costumes and have some theme around the costumes and being all overachieving women. We not only had costumes, we had skits, we had songs, we had themes, it was like literally 3 days of secret meetings and everybody, don't tell them what we're gonna be. And we seriously had 27 minutes and then it was like, all hands on deck, like get down the mizzen, get down the this, and we had complete, weather, but this is my team. So Emily was a giant whale. We had the anglerfish. I was a mermaid. And then we had an octopus and a sea turtle who was entangled in the net. And we had a song and we got second prize. And then that's our captain, Anna, who again was just absolutely amazing and calm. Was just like, at the helm, like, okay, ladies, like, let's hurry it up, because here comes a storm, like, girls, and we had to have on our life vests, and we're clipped in while we're all doing our little dance and our, well choreographed stuff. So this is Yannicka. These guys are amazing. She's from Malta, and they won first place. So.
We'll speak soon. Oh, bingo! What's going on, ladies and ladies? Look at that! Wow! Isn't that Broadway? Oh! That bingo is a classic thing. Look at that shiny velvet gold. So sleek, so smooth, so shiny. My oh my.
So they did like a very extended skit. Let's see it, Mama. She's from Australia, so it's appropriate song for her.
Whoa, take it, Mama. Where's the cigarette and alcohol?
You know about my secret stuff.
I do, baby. I do. I know your ways. I know your ways.
Totally not a videographer.
Top of the morning to ya.
So we lost the wind as we came, into the office. We basically ran into a hole and had to motor sail for a bit of it. And then, because again, we were all, had many late nights on board where we were, coming up with all sorts of songs. How many of you all know that if you cross the Atlantic, you wear red pants? Wow, see? So there's this whole thing. So apparently I'm Scandinavian, and apparently like Scandinavian sailors, when they sailed across the Atlantic, they wore red pants because they then used them as sails, and that's where the red sails come from. But there's definitely a thing about if you cross the Atlantic, you wear red pants. So we all ended up getting red pants when we got there. And this is literally, I'll play this for a second. So we came up with a theme song, and we had just dinghied into shore after being on the boat for 25 days. And this is us being saved.
we cross the Atlantic. The Atlantic
So that was us a little bit excited, and we finally, it was a 0 alcohol trip. So nobody had had a drink, and that's the first thing we did was head to the bar. And I got a chicken sandwich. And this is us parked in front of the Antigua Yacht Club, and they welcomed us incredibly. So what can you do? So after learning all of the down and outs of the problems that's out there, and one of the things that I really learned was refuse. So not just reuse, but if you're going to the store, and I eat a lot of honey, you know, and a lot of it isn't a plastic thing. And now I will, even if it's more expensive, I will buy the honey that's in the glass jar, you know, and I'm converting my house, which I Airbnb, into a house that's kind of a model for, you know, zero waste. And many of the girls on the boat were actually zero wasters, where they literally, they can put the amount of plastic garbage that they produce in a year in a bag. And like, I am nowhere near there, but definitely trying to go that. And I think just having the conversation or asking the question, or if you go to someplace and say, hey, do you have containers that, you know, aren't styrofoam or aren't plastic? I think that's, you know, part of the way that we can help to move it forward. And I'm going to be talking to the city council in Santa Cruz next week, which is doing a lot on this as well. Certainly avoiding, another thing that we really learned from the woman, Marita, who was from the plastic company, was this idea of the circular economy. And from her standpoint, you know, she was sort of the enemy on board, but not at all. And, you know, she's like, it's your demand for plastic that's driving plastic, right? And so, you know, you got to demand alternatives, and you got to demand that the system changes. And so, like, if we look at this table, you know, basically the solution, which is way more complicated than any of us want it to be, but that, you know, that table is most likely plastic. Sorry if it's all teak, but anyway, let's just pretend that it's all plastic. You know, basically what she's saying is that the solution is that the company that produces that table, that production cycle becomes a closed loop, where, you know, whatever products that are putting into that are getting recycled and putting into the next generation of products that are being developed. And that is, you know, way more complicated, which means that there's all these sort of small circular loops within industries, so that all of our televisions become recyclable, so they don't downcycle, which is what happens when we recycle, is that, you know, you give your plastic water bottle to a recycling company, you know, or to Santa Cruz Recycling, but then it ultimately, you know, goes down a notch, but it ultimately still becomes, you know, plastic waste. And, you know, the management of that is, you know, clearly a problem, because so much is entering our oceans. And this is kind of, you know, the transition towards a circular economy means, you know, dealing with government, the retailers, the waste sorting. When we have a huge problem in the United States. I was just in Europe for a couple of weeks, and, you know, their recycling system is way more advanced and refined than ours is. And I think we have a long way to go, you know, with some of that. And I was thrilled, like, I can take the slide out because you guys are going plastic free. But we were in Antigua, a lot of the races are becoming, you know, plastic free. So the Antigua Yacht Club and Antigua Sailing Week, and, you know, they host a lot of events there. The Royal Hong Kong Yacht Club just went plastic free. So it's certainly a trend, and there's lots of lessons to be learned, you know, from that community. You can't read this very well, but these are some of the things, you know, getting bulk water and reusable containers that are out there. And, you know, in Santa Cruz, we're doing the Just Say No to Plastic Straws. But there's lots of ways that, you know, we can become a clean marina here in Santa Cruz and a clean yacht club here at the Santa Cruz Yacht Club. And I'm not pitching the zero shop, but I did go in there when I came back because I'm trying to make my house now as an Airbnb, zero waste. But if you don't know about it and you do want to, make your sailboat or events, more plastic conscious, this is a great store, and she's really interested in working with businesses and organizations and events to help. She will service you and find the product that you need. So really cool new store in Santa Cruz. It's in Capitola, down in the village, and I can get you that. And this was no small endeavor. We all had to sponsor, either financially ourselves, or, with crowdfunding or with sponsors. I was fortunate enough, I had this St. John, like I said, I came from the Virgin Islands, the St. John Yacht Club helped me out a lot. The Patagonia outlet, Santa Cruz. The reason that you see these photos is because I'm wearing all Patagonia. They literally outfitted me in those pants that I'm wearing, I just love, and lived in those. West Marine, the boots are from West Marine, they gave me. We actually had official eXXpedition, survival gear and fallies that don't make you look fat, because they were for all girls. But they both have helped me out and continue to be doing events and work with them, the Smithsonian and Netflix, and I work for the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation, who fully supported my participation in this. And then just crowdfunding, I was super, fortunate to have that. So that's kind of it. And I'm happy to answer any questions. That's my red shorts, by the way. I did get red shorts because I was like, and I'm sitting on my brand new Patagonia bag because I thought I should.
What was your average boat speed when you were really moving?
We were doing 7 to 9, 10 knots, a lot. Apparently we hit overhaul speed at 12.5 knots downwind, and I have a feeling I was at the helm when that happened because my arms and legs, like I came back and I was like, you think like, you're normally getting exercise when you're sailing, but I mean, it was hard. I'd never done that much downwind sailing and with that much power, because we had a, they call it a Yankee, and then, we had the staysail up, a mainsail, and then mizzen sail. So we had a lot of sail up. Almost always we were reefed, just because we had so much wind coming across, but it was hard to manhandle that thing.
Woman handle it.
Woman handle it, exactly. Sorry, yes. Woman, lady handle it, yeah.
No autopilot,
No autopilot. When I was like, wait a minute, like, where's the autopilot on this thing? No, they want people on deck, and yeah, that was by design that there's no autopilot.
Did you run into any other boats out there? Did you see people? I mean, how many days did you go before you saw?
We left the Azores, on a bad day, and one other bigger, faster vessel than us, who she must have been going towards Brazil because she was headed, much more towards the south than us. So we saw one sailboat, and then about, I think we were like 550 miles east of Cape Canaveral, kind of at that latitude. We were all on deck. It was a beautiful night, and we were all on deck just after dinner at 8 o'clock at night. And all of a sudden we look up and everybody starts freaking out, and we're looking up, and I'm way into the stars, so I had taught everybody the stars, and we were doing like celestial navigation and stuff. And everybody's like, Ricky, what is that? And I'm like, looking up, that's not a star. They're not stars. And everybody starts freaking out, and somebody's like, no, it's military, it's, something else. And I was like, those are going way too fast for military. And then it was when we had the whole thing with like Trump and, are we going to Syria? This was before this whole thing. And, a lot of girls started crying, burst into tears, like, oh my God, Donald Trump is sending, the military. Is like, you guys, like these vessels, they were, completely standardized in terms of the distance apart from each other, and they were way too fast. Turns out it was Elon Musk had sent those satellites up, and we saw them going from Cape Canaveral, and it was super trippy. So the next day we saw a cargo vessel that was off, and that was it. So until we came up on to the Caribbean, and then we saw some vessels, but there was nothing really but us and our minke whale and a couple of pods of dolphins and, some cool birds. We saw tropic birds as we came in to the tropics that were really pretty. We had, the flying fish that were on deck. But as a marine biologist, I was like, there's no life out here. Like, it really was frightening to me. And especially like for the Pacific, right, where we look out and you always see stuff, more so. So yeah. Yeah.
How did you get this whole thing funded? Was it all?
Yeah, so it's also eXXpedition. You get, you have to apply or you get invited. So I got invited, which was fortunate, but then like you still have to fund it, because in my case, I think I had to come up with something like $7,000, or they kind of subsidized it. So everybody that was on this leg, each leg is sort of worth a different amount of money, or it costs the vessel a different amount of money. So you have to go get sponsors, you have to crowdfund. So that's who, I did a GoFundMe page. I funded some of it myself. My time was donated by by the organization that I work for. And then I had, different funders, help support it. So.
But the yacht itself, that's an expensive.
It's a nonprofit, so you'll see on the side of the boat, which I didn't know who any of them are. So there are 3 organizations. Tomrin is actually the big company that makes recycling equipment, like huge recycling equipment. So they're a primary funder. I think that cost them like $2.5 million. And Ensign Group is another, they've got their logo on the side of the vessel, and then every leg is sponsored by a funder. So every leg is kind of funded. So that's why I want to talk with West Marine and see if they won't be, and that's like worth X amount. So it's a nonprofit. It's totally, just grant funded, and yeah. But like I said, they thought this was like some small endeavor, and the amount of press this is getting is just like, it's orders of magnitude higher than they thought. Like, so hopefully it'll, yeah, I think it's really powerful. I mean, in every place, like they were just in the San Blas Islands taking kids out on the boat, doing cleanups. Like it's really reaching a lot of places. Yeah.
I'm surprised like you that there's so much packaging goes into the ocean.
Yeah.
And do you know who is doing it and how much? I'm also surprised how many tons every month go into the ocean. What you said there.
Yeah, it's 11 billion tons a
And who's
year.
doing that?
We all are. I mean, it really, the thing is that, like, who do you want to blame, or how do you want to classify that, right? So, if you look at the top rivers, which is where a lot of it comes from, rivers, those rivers are in Africa and in Asia. But where is it coming from? It's coming from plants or waste that a lot of it was our waste, and we shipped it there, right? And it got mismanaged. So it's kind of all of our responsibility, because we're the demanders of it. and then we export our waste and we assume somebody else is gonna get rid of it properly, and that clearly isn't happening. You know, so I really think, you know, I'm not a big proponent, although, I mean, I'm really sad that that minke whale is still out there eating all that plastic, and all of his offspring are gonna do that, but I think like it's, the analogy to me is like, you know, I'm in my kitchen and, you know, the sink is overflowing, like, you know, and I'm like, help, help, help. Like, you gotta shut the water off first before you start mopping up the floor. Or you gotta, you know, before you start, you know, pumping out the water, you gotta stop the input of the water if you're sailing. And I think that's what we gotta focus on, because I don't see us getting all these little bits out of the ocean. Yeah.
There's a Dutch company, I believe, they are doing it, they're using sort of huge.
The booms, yeah, so that's the big, it's got a lot of press, and it's off the coast, and it's working in the Pacific garbage patch, but it's not addressing at all microplastic, you know, and it's run into all sorts of problems. And, you know, like I say, the girls who are just now in the Sandblast Islands, they saw way more plastic there than we did in the North Atlantic Gyre. So unless you're gonna have like a whole system of booms across the globe, you know, how are you gonna get it out of there? Like, and once you, like, think of the fossil fuels that you're gonna spend trying to, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, it's bigger than Texas. Like, I mean, you know, the problem is it's big, for lack of a better word.
Do you think anytime in the foreseeable future that maybe microorganisms will evolve to start eating these plastics and turning them into something not so toxic or problematic?
That's a different time scale than evolution, you know, typically. Yeah, no. I mean, certainly someday, sure, you know, but we might have, you know, we might have destroyed the ocean as we know it by then. And I don't know. It's pretty toxic stuff, you know.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, do we think that organisms can evolve or adapt to be able to consume microplastic that's out there? And, you know, I mean, something's gonna come out of the planet after we're done with it, for sure. Things are going to survive. It just may look very different than, you know, what we think it ought to or would want it to. Yes.
Couple questions. Well, first, thank you. This is really cool. Sounds like an exciting time. What after the 4 legs? Like, how long has eXXpedition been around before these expeditions?
So eXXpedition has been around for a couple years, but they've never undertaken anything like this. So this is the first time they're doing this. And they're on leg 5 now. Actually, the girls finally got this crew, like, God bless them. They literally don't get a day off. So the captain signed on for 2 years. And so when we go into port, like, we were all drinking and partying, and she came out, and we all actually wore our life vests, out drinking and whining and grinding. And some of them even had their, you know, their lights on, which was kind of funny. I cut those out of the slideshow. But you know, they're on for the whole duration of the 2 years is what the whole eXXpedition is. And like I said, they've done a couple of trips before that are like 3-week journeys or anything, but this, you know, where they have a schedule, and I'm actually trying to get on the leg, either on the Arctic leg or to go from northern Australia to Mauritius is a leg I'd love to go on. But this is the first time they've done it like this at all.
And what are they hoping ultimately to, like, what's the goal? What's the final product that will come out?
Good question. So there's 3 primary goals. So one is to basically raise awareness by doing something cool that gets people out there elevating the conversation, right? So it's creating, all the media attention that's gone around this issue, and people really think it's neat that it's all women. Like, that part of it really is interesting and inspiring to people around the world and has gotten a lot of media attention. The second is to, bring together all these, women who are out there doing really cool things and create a community among them of change makers, so that we all, and we are, we really are, like, literally, probably when I get to my phone, there'll be like 4 text messages from Antigua crew, on our WhatsApp messages, where we're all communicating with each other all the time. And then the third thing is to, in every place that we go, we're identifying projects and we're identifying things that we can do and follow up with those places. So, like, I'm still working with the Antigua Yacht Club. I'm still working with, a researcher who's in the Azores. I'm getting all the samples, analyzed for now the whole trip, on, the larval stuff. So it's just to kind of make this more impactful.
And there's a final question.
Okay, I guess so.
The woman who was the sustainability director for the largest plastic manufacturer in the world, was there any talk from her about like extended producer responsibility? You mentioned like the circular economy, but just from manufacturing standpoint, are they willing to change their own manufacturing practice?
Yeah.
Given the plastic pollution crisis.
Yeah, it's economic to them, right? And she argues very effectively that it is economics and it's our demand that drives it. So what she would say is that economic responsibility needs to get borne by all of us. So, one of her responses is like, if a car costs, let's say, $30,000, and I'm gonna build a car that costs $37,000 and is plastic free. What car are you gonna buy? You as a consumer are not likely in general to buy the more expensive car. So they're producing the $30,000 car. And as long as plastic is, we talked a lot about plastic taxes because it's all, it's fossil fuel driven, right? The reason plastic is so cheap is because there's no fossil fuel tax. There's no tax on what it actually costs in terms of consequences of fossil fuel, right? And it's subsidized. We, as the United States, subsidize it heavily. So I think she would come back, and I don't know because I'm nowhere near as knowledgeable nor articulate as her, and say that burden economically needs to get borne across the entire system. And unless we're willing to push for that, she was way against regulation, which was interesting. And she said, policy and regulation, that is not, it's the consumer kind of awareness and demand and responsibility where, which actually makes it more important for all of us, right? That means we have more power than we thought we had.
I've been a conservation associate at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and I speak on this topic. And I'll just tell you that Nestle, the largest packaging manufacturer in the world, is committed to changing packaging and getting out of plastic. And it's a lot of the top ones. So it's all levels. And you said not government or regulation. That's not true. We're having a lot of action at the state and county levels and city levels. And you mentioned Santa Cruz, what they're doing. So I think we need to think individually what we're doing. You said refuse. That's a good start, at least ask. And 2, then at your community level, what can you do recycling wise, et cetera, or even, and then like the club just here, right, saying I'm gonna change. So, and the individual. So we gotta get everybody contributing, and people are going after the producers or the packagers at least, and they're starting to commit to.
Absolutely, and I didn't mean to imply that, regulation and policy can't affect change. It's just from their perspective, that's not the biggest thing they're gonna respond to, yeah.
So Ricky, while you were talking, sort of as a follow-on, I sort of looked at my person, what I'm wearing, what I've got on.
It's
what I've got
horrible.
in my purse, and I probably got 100 pieces of plastic that I personally brought into the room.
Right,
Right? So it's my shoes, it's the caps on the shoelaces.
totally.
It's, perhaps part of my jewelry, part of my clothing, the plastic zipper on my jacket, whatever, your phone, how many pieces of plastic go into that. Everything that we buy, everything that we touch, it's a huge, to go plastic free is impossible in the modern urban environment.
Absolutely.
But there are, a lot of choices that we make, but just to say that, it's everything that we touch in this modern world that we live in.
It's everything we touch, and I went into Patagonia to get prepared for this, and we weren't allowed to have fleece because we were sampling and we would contaminate. And here I am going to a company, who was giving me this incredible, reduced rate to wardrobe myself. And it was hard to wardrobe myself with non-synthetic polyester, and I mean, what we were sampling doesn't even get at like the microfiber plastic, right? I mean, it's absolutely what you're saying is our clothes are a huge source of plastic that gets into our water, and gets then, evacuated in our stormwater and our wastewater system. So yeah, no, it's a problem we never saw that we were creating. Yeah.
Do they have a website or?
Yeah, eXXpedition has a website, they have a blog, they have video, they're all over the media. So it's right there. eXXXX, and they say it, I didn't realize this till I was on the boat, eXXpedition.com. And they're still accepting applications should you or anybody be interested in applying. They are currently on break, thank God, in the Panama. They just went through the Panama Canal, and Anna has a break for like 2 weeks. And then they're going from Panama to Easter Island, and then Easter Island to, I think, are they maybe trying to stop in the Pitcairn? I think they are trying to stop in Pitcairn. And then going up to the Marquesas. Other questions?
You mentioned the medical field right at the beginning of that's a big contributor. I work in that field, and one of the things we're talking about straws in Santa Cruz County, but Dominican Hospital gives a plastic straw to every single patient they have. So is there a way that we can, other than saying, I don't want a plastic straw, is there another way that we can?
Yeah, there's great, and I can leave you my card. There's great alternatives. That's one of the things is that technology has really come up with all sorts of alternatives to plastic. A straw you use for what, like 3 minutes? And yet it's gonna be in the environment for 650 years. So there's tons of great, and there continues to be all sorts of alternative, products that are biological, and therefore degrade, and don't end up in our, oceans. So I think it's, that's why I say, your voice is just like the biggest starting point. It's just saying, hey, have you guys thought about going, to alternatives? And it's, I kind of look at it like, if you think about 20 years ago with organic, right? One, you didn't know, was it really organic? Because there wasn't really a standard. And what does it mean to be organic? And it's 6 times with plastic free. And so we're getting there with organic. It's in Safeway now. Whoever would have thought that, right? So I think that by just demanding and asking in a nice way, and suggesting and being informed that, hey, there's, there's this product and it costs 10 cents more, just that's how we're gonna shift the needle. And that I think would be industry's point, is if you're willing, because for packaging especially, what she would say is, you've got, refrigeration requirements and things have to be, non-contaminated, and you've got different products that have to be, have a lifespan, for a certain amount of time, and you want them to hit all those marks, are you willing to pay the amount that it's gonna cost for that transition period for, the economies of scale to get there, so. But you see it every day, more and more and more. I mean, my girlfriend, who I do bike trips with, she just left her company, and her company is the biggest supplier of plastic beach chairs in the world. So like every beach chair you get at Costco and Target and Walmart, and she just branched off from them and is now, somebody in the audience was talking about Polution, where you buy a bracelet and it goes towards, they're paying people in Haiti and Indonesia to pick up what I call ocean-bound plastic. It actually isn't in the ocean yet. And then they're using that to make plastic. And so her company now, she tore off from them, is now gonna make, recycled plastic chairs and competing with her company, and she can weather the storm of lawsuits that they're gonna go after her for. But, you see more and more of that, where people are like, hey, there's a better way to do this, and I'm gonna take the chance. Yeah, so buy her plastic chairs, I'll get you her info as well. Yeah.
There's some things that people can do in general, like a lot of my girlfriends get together and we clean our closets, we recycle by doing a clothes exchange, because you don't necessarily wear the same things all the time, you can share that. A lot of the clothes, like you said, are made from China or different places, and they have plastic in them. Those are some of the things that you could do, simple things like that, instead of going out and buying new, or,
Absolutely.
There's a lot of things we can do to upcycle,
Right.
And still use it to the best we can to its end before you throw it out and go buy something new, are some of the things. And that whole note on medical, as a healthcare provider, that is one of the biggest comments that's going on in the medical world, is that the hospitals, because everything is wrapped in plastic and it's used once.
Right.
Everything from the ice bag to the straw to the needles that are open to the wraps that are open. And there does have to be, some kind of voice in that community to help make a shift. So I think what Ricky's saying is having a voice is so important.
Yeah, I think medical, I just was flying on British Airways the night before last, and I think I got given or offered 8 plastic glasses in a flight. Like, I'd attack, I think the medical field is probably the most legitimate reason for plastic use, whereas there's others, it's like, could they hand us a paper cup like at the beginning and say, put your name on it, or something, right? Like we do on sailboats, like, here, put a little marker on it. I think but absolutely, the medical field is certainly a big user of it, but they're probably, the most reason to use it. That's where plastic was kind of, started, yeah. Other questions, comments? People who want to pressure West Marine?
Well, thank you very much for coming tonight.
And we'll see you all next week, right? All right.
Thanks, Ricky. Thanks, Josh.
Ride your bikes home safely.
Thanks.